Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And well, we got yet another, another confirmation for a big Xbox Game Pass game that's slated for next month in April. And of course, this is a day one title because, well, that's just kind of what they do. I will say this much, though, that Bethesda acquisition is really paying off for Microsoft right now, and I'll explain why here in just a little bit. Also, an interesting Nintendo Switch Online feature leaked out online, and this also includes a much-anticipated game that, let me tell you, is absolutely amazing. So, a lot to get into today. Of course, do hit those buttons below. That's always highly, highly encouraged. But I mean, let's just go and jump right into it, starting off with the Xbox Activision Blizzard acquisition. This basically piggybacks off of what we talked about yesterday, where Microsoft is attempting to convince these regulators that they really are the good, swell guys that they say they are, and that they have every intention on not only keeping Call of Duty on PlayStation, which, I mean, is evident to absolutely everybody by this point, but that they also intend on bringing Call of Duty to more players, not less. That has been their slogan all along. But regulators, they kind of refuse to believe this. They don't want to just take their word for it. Well, Microsoft basically said, okay, fair enough, because they're now fighting back by offering 10-year contracts to different platform holders. Of course, they signed an agreement with Nintendo. That was a monstrous contract. They've signed an agreement with Nvidia, one of their biggest cloud-based competitors, and then a handshake and a high five with Valve because Gabe Newell is, he's just cool like that. So they've already gotten 3 of the top dogs on their side, but Microsoft isn't finished just yet because they're crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's, as yesterday they signed a 10-year contract to bring Xbox PC games and Activision Blizzard titles to Boosteroid, which is the largest independent cloud game provider in the world with 4 million users. And then today, they added on to that by signing yet another 10-year contract with Ubisoft. Now, who knows if I'm actually pronouncing that properly, we'll go and ignore that. But this is actually a fascinating partnership that fans need to pay attention to, because Ubisoft is another cloud game provider most well known for their work in bringing games over to the Nintendo Switch with their cloud-based technology. This includes both Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Resident Evil 7. Now, this isn't necessarily to say that Xbox games will suddenly come over to Nintendo platforms, but there is a link here that could maybe make that a reality in the future if Microsoft and Nintendo chooses to do so. Either which way, this is yet another move to corner regulators. As Microsoft's Brad Smith said, just another day of ensuring access to more games for more people everywhere, including Call of Duty, once the Activision acquisition is complete. Yeah, they know exactly what they're doing here. Microsoft has confirmed that they will fight in court if need be, and each one of these contracts, this puts regulators in a tougher and tougher spot, and it puts them in a weaker position to oppose the deal legally. Next up, let's go and talk about the Steam Deck. I've had the Steam Deck myself for a little while now, and let me tell you, all the hype for this thing is absolutely legit. It's a marvelous piece of technology, and it's sometimes hard to believe what this thing is capable of. I mean, I can run Doom Eternal on max settings, which is crazy for a device this small. Seriously, I do need to put together a full Steam Deck video at some point. But as good as this thing is, there's also a very clear path for its future. And what I mean by that is that there's fundamental parts of its design that could be improved for an even better model. And the 2 things that you'll constantly hear about is its battery life and then its screen. It does, without a doubt, need better battery life. That goes without much explanation. But more so, a lot of fans want the option of an OLED screen. Now, I do have both the Steam Deck and the Switch OLED, and I'll just go and say for myself, if there's a game that's not demanding, I buy it on the Switch OLED because the screen is just flat out better. And the colors, they pop more. The screen does matter that much, but I'll go ahead and include a picture here just to kind of show you what I'm talking about. The Switch OLED on the top clearly looks better. The colors obviously pop more, and that's why, despite it not being as powerful, some games will look better on the Switch OLED. Well, obviously, Valve has been asked a lot about an incremental upgrade for an OLED model, and Valve has now responded. The statement was made by a Steam Deck developer in an interview with PC Gamer, where he said, "We also want it to be better. We're looking at all avenues. I think people are looking at things like an incremental version and assume that it's an easy drop-in. But in reality, the screen's at the core of the device. Everything is anchored to it. Basically, everything is architected around everything when you're talking about a device that small. I think it would be a bigger amount of work than people are assuming it would be. I don't think we're discounting anything, but the idea that you could just swap in a new screen and be done, it would need more than that to be doable. So yeah, with that statement in mind, it does sound like they are looking into an OLED model, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily sound like you should expect it anytime soon. More or less, don't hold your breath. An OLED model is still likely a ways away. Now, we also got an update for Valheim. This is a game that just absolutely blew up on PC back in 2021, and to this day, it is still one of the most popular and beloved survival games that you can play on PC. Well, and here's the thing, it also just released on Xbox yesterday, including an Xbox Game Pass release. You subscribers out there continue to be spoiled. But this is Valheim's first time on console. And well, that does beg the question, what about PlayStation? Is Valheim also planned for PlayStation later down the line? And, well, Iron Game Studios clarified the situation by saying no, they currently have no plans for a PlayStation version. They went on to say that, quote-unquote, currently, we're only looking at the Xbox, but you never know. So, while this is probably not exactly what you want to hear if you're on PlayStation, they do kind of leave the door open here for a future PlayStation release down the line, and my guess is that it will eventually happen. But as of this moment, their priorities are simply on Xbox, and that's for good reason. Valheim is in early access after all, and PlayStation doesn't allow early access games. So I think when this game finishes up with its early access, that's when they'll likely start to consider a PlayStation version as well. Might be a while, but that's kind of the situation for the time being. Now, speaking of Xbox Game Pass, though, Bethesda just announced yet another big day one inclusion, being Ghostwire Tokyo. This game released exclusively for the PlayStation 5 and PC last year as a part of their timed exclusivity deal that predated the acquisition. But now here we are in 2023, and Ghostwire Tokyo is now confirmed for an Xbox April release, and better yet, they're attempting to make the wait well worth it for Xbox players. This release will come included with a major update, which, by the way, can also be played on other platforms, so do kind of keep that in mind. But yes, this update will include multiple new additions to the game, such as more areas to explore, new enemies, new skills, extended cutscenes, and even a new roguelike game mode. So this is a beefy update with some really interesting new content. I mean, this game has always had a fascinating setting, but I know some fans will really like the idea of a roguelike game mode in specific. If anything, though, they are treating this as the definitive release with a ton of new content to enjoy. This will all be out on April 12th, so there you go. Another big day one inclusion for Xbox Game Pass. You know, if you think about it, though, Bethesda's output has really shown up in a big way for Xbox pretty much since late last year. I mean, if you think about it, since September of last year, they've dropped Deathloop into Game Pass. That's a great title. Then you have Hi-Fi Rush. That shadow dropped out of nowhere. That is an excellent game. Definitely go check that out if you haven't already. And then coming from the exact same studio, Tango Gameworks, they're now set to release Ghostwire Tokyo with all its new content just 2 short months later. Again, if you like Hi-Fi Rush, this is coming from the exact same studio. But that's kind of the thing here, though, because this is just the beginning. Bethesda still has Redfall and Starfield coming later this year as well, and possibly even some more surprises along the way. We also know they have other games in development like Indiana Jones, a possible new Doom title, Elder Scrolls 6 is coming in the far future, among others, and you can really see that acquisition for Bethesda is starting to pay off for Microsoft here. Nonetheless, Xbox Game Pass is certainly showing its worth in 2023, if anything else, and if you're interested in Ghostwire Tokyo, go ahead and mark your calendars for, again, April 12th. Next up, let's go and talk about Nintendo as an interesting Switch Online feature and a possible upcoming game just leaked out online. Last week, as some of you all may know, Metroid Fusion released into Switch Online, which, I mean, that alone is very exciting. I highly encourage you to check that game out. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Metroid fans right now are living the dream. Sometimes it's unfortunately been a tough time to be a Metroid fan, as the series has dipped off into long stretches of obscurity at times with weird releases like, you know, the Federation Force and Metroid Other M, but that's not really been the case at all with the Nintendo Switch. In the last 2 years, Nintendo has brought Metroid back in full force. Metroid Dread finally released and became the best-selling Metroid game of all time. Then you have the Metroid Prime Remaster, which seems to be doing very well for itself. It's been topping the charts in numerous locations. But then you also have Switch Online that has access to some of these older games, including Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, and soon enough, it looks like another beloved Game Boy Advance game is on its way, being none other than Metroid Zero Mission. It does appear this game leaked out online as screenshots were found in Metroid Fusion that shows its link cable functionality. More on that here in just a second, but if you've never played Zero Mission before, this is actually a remake of the first Metroid game, which puts it more in line with games like Super Metroid. Now, I know Super Metroid is a fan favorite and everything, and for good reason, but I will say this. In terms of gameplay, Metroid Zero Mission does do some things better. Even though it's a shorter game, its controls are improved, and debatably, it's one of the best Metroid entries to date. So this, without a doubt, would be one of the more exciting releases for Switch Online if true, and honestly, I'm sure it is. This game is going to come over to Switch Online at some point. It's going to happen. I think it's really a matter of when, not necessarily if. More on this Link cable leak, though, because that's quietly the big story here. As you can see, posted up by Yakumono says more people are taking notice of this. Some may think these are just random screenshots because they don't modify the games and stuff, but these are definitely screenshots for the how to use Link instructions by their file names. Yakumono then continues on to say, I do not have an English screenshot on hand, but no joke, they wrote instructions on how to use the Link feature for every game, where you can do that for both Game Boy and Game Boy Advance and Nintendo Switch Online. These screenshots would be used here. So this is actually really good news. Nintendo is taking link cable features very seriously. It does look like they're exploring the idea of adding link cable features to Switch Online, which, I mean, that's big news, especially when it comes to Pokemon. I mean, talking about Metroid Zero Mission being an obvious future release, well, at some point, the Pokemon games will come as well, and that's when you'll likely see a huge surge in subscriptions for Switch Online, especially if you have access to link cable features where you can easily trade and battle other people in an easy-to-use way. And oh, by the way, I should have probably said this before, but for those of you that aren't aware of what a link cable is, this is for the younger crowd out there. That kind of makes me feel old to say, but it was a way to connect your Game Boy and Game Boy Advance to another console. That way you can access multiplayer features. And it looks like that could be heading over to Nintendo Switch Online. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, where I asked you all, with Bayonetta Origins reviewing well, do you plan on picking it up later this week? And as you can see here, only 7% of you said yes, 64% being the majority said no, and then 20% of you said you're going to wait for a sale. So I think what the results kind of tells you here is that the price for this game is definitely a problem for some people out there. 20% of you are waiting for a sale. I think that's kind of telling of the overall situation here. I do think that $60 price tag is a problem for some people out there. I mean, we've seen it online. Some people are very questionable of its $60 price tag. I mean, the thing is that Bayonetta is a great series. I'm personally excited to play Bayonetta Origins myself, but at the end of the day, some people do look at it and kind of wonder, why is this $60? And we've seen this happen with other games before, and even if they are great, take a look at something like Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. That was a great game. It reviewed well, but people kind of expected it to go on sale shortly after, so a lot of people are just kind of holding their ground. And I mean, I think we're kind of seeing something similar here with Bayonetta Origins, maybe for different reasons, but I do wonder if it would have been priced at $40, if more people would have jumped on right away. That's kind of the importance of getting your price tag correct right out of the gate to really kind of launch with a ton of momentum. And I think there's questions when it comes to Bayonetta Origins and whether they got that price correct or not. Nonetheless, though, I mean, this does look like a good game. Like I said before, I'm excited to play this one later this week, but there it is. It does look like a good portion, if you will, are waiting. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.